Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is dustinkreis, and today we are going to do a game discussion, and we're going to talk about this game right here, Lost Odyssey for the Xbox 360. Brought to us by Mistwalker, Sakaguchi's company that he formed after he left Square, or forced out, if you will. Bought this not the year it came out. It might have been the next year or the year following. Finally got around to just kind of picking it up and started playing it. Got stuck on a boss and then shelved it for something else and never went back to it for years. Finally, doing my backlog for this year, trying to figure out what I wanted to finish, I said, I gotta sit down and I have to finish Lost Odyssey. I sit up here and I talk about RPGs all the time, and this is a pretty big hole in my completion of RPGs. And I just finally said, enough's enough, throw it in, play it. And I had an amazing time with this. I absolutely adore Lost Odyssey. It has its quirks, and it has some faults to it. But on the whole, this is the perfect modern update to a classic Final Fantasy. And that's both good and bad. In a lot of ways, it's very good, because if you're like me, you love like Final Fantasy 4 through 6. I mean, those are just perfect, games. And this game feels immensely like Final Fantasy 4 through 6. Even the PlayStation Final Fantasies. It feels a lot like those. And that's a great feeling. You sit down, you play this, you just feel like you know what everything's supposed to do. The new systems, you just kind of pick it up as you go. Really great feeling in an RPG. The bad part is also, it feels like a PlayStation 1 RPG. There's a lot of clunkiness to it. There's a bit of... It's a pretty slow RPG in a lot of ways. Battles take a long time to load. Every time you leave a screen, it takes a long time to load the next, area. It's just kind of a slow game. There's also some interesting story choices, some interesting voice acting choices, and some graphical hiccups that kind of hold this back. But taken on the whole, I really love Lost Odyssey. I think it's one of those games that it seems like in the community it gets a lot of praise and a lot of people like sing its praises, but in the mainstream world of gaming, it's kind of forgotten in a lot of ways. And it's kind of sad. You can go to GameStop and you can pick this up for $11. So there's a buy two, as of this recording right now, there's a buy two get one free going on, and that's a great time to pick this up. If you want a classic old school RPG, definitely pick this up. But let's go ahead and get into it and talk about it. The storyline for this, I really enjoyed the storyline. There's some times where it feels like things aren't connecting very well, like the plot lines are just kind of very loosely tied together. But once you get to the end, you really feel like you've been with these characters and you know these characters. Even the ones I didn't really care for, like Cook and Mac and Jensen, can sometimes grate a little bit on the nerves. Even by the end of it, you really kind of care for them and want to see the journey to the end. The weird thing about this game, and I kept thinking about this the entire time I played it, this would have made an amazing part 3 of a trilogy. Just imagine it, like the first game in the series takes place when the Immortals first come to this new world, and Gongora is a member of your party and all that kind of stuff, and it's about you kind of going through the world. The second game takes place 500 years, right in the middle of the timeline, and events happen and blah blah blah, and then the final game takes place at the end of the 1,000 years, and it's pretty much plays exactly like it is. It always felt like that. It felt like the third part of a much larger story. But the storyline consists of, you play as Kaim, a 1,000-year-old immortal who has no recollection of his memories. And he kind of sets out to help this advisor to a king named Gongora investigate some strange happenings at this huge thing called Grandstaff. And the storyline goes on from there. You find out that Kaim and the other immortals that live in this world have had their memories erased. You, of course, find out who the villain is, which I kind of gave away, but this game's been out for a long time, so if you haven't played it yet, that's kind of your fault. I guess I'll put a minor spoiler thing, a warning up there. But I think everyone knows by now that Gongora is the villain, and it's not like a big, huge plot twist or anything like that anyway. You kind of get it right from the get-go. Yeah, there is kind of a lot of weird little surprises in the story. I was surprised at how emotional sometimes the story gets, because when you first meet Kaim, he's very kind of dead to the world, very emotionless, and I had a really hard time, getting an attachment to his character. The voice actor keeps it very leveled. There's no real great emotion coming from Kaim, so he's kind of a hard character to be your entry point into the world. I found Seth to be a much more engaging character early on in the game. In fact, by the end of the game, Seth was my favorite character in the entire game. There's just something about her that I really, really dug. Especially when you get to the ending of the game, it's like, wow, she really is quite an awesome character. But the other characters, like I said, Jensen, he's kind of the comedic relief. Sometimes the lines work really well. Sometimes it's just hit or miss. Mac and Cook, I was not a fan of Palom and Porum in Final Fantasy IV. In fact, I really don't like when they put kid characters in these games. I don't understand it, I guess, because you think about it, these people are facing life and death, battles and struggles. Why would you have a bunch of kids, kind of go around with you? It's the same thing as kind of introducing all these children into Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. It kind of just, I don't know, it kind of weakens it just a little bit. But so, I understand. This feels in a lot of ways like a modern update of Final Fantasy IV, but the kids, who said I thought was a cool character. Tolton was a puss the entire game, but that's kind of his journey, is to not be a puss anymore. And then the other immortals like Ming and Sarah, you never really get a good handle on the immortals. They're always kind of elusive. And that might be because they're supposed to be 1,000 years and kind of aloof, 1,000-year-old, I'm sorry, and kind of aloof from the rest of the characters. But Seth is such a dynamic character in the game. I find it really weird that the other ones, by the end of the game, of course, they all kind of find emotional, through lines. But for a long time, those immortal characters are kind of hard to get by. But the storyline is really good, really engaging. There are some, I want to say overly RPG cliches in the storyline where you're like, oh yeah, whatever, I get it. Let's move the storyline forward, we get it. But other than that, by the end of the game, you're going to sit back and be like, wow, I had a really great journey with these characters. The gameplay is standard RPG fare, really, really classic feeling. I really dug just the very traditional turn-based feel of the battles, because we don't get these kind of RPGs a lot anymore. They always try to shoehorn in these really weird systems that just, sometimes they work really well and sometimes they fall flat on their face. And when you either put in like an old school RPG and just get a good, active time battle system going on or something like that, or you play a modern game that evokes those old systems, it's really kind of refreshing, and it really reminds you that you don't really have to reinvent the wheel every time. Just do a very traditional turn-based battle system and throw in some really refined peppering, extra systems, and you'll be surprised at how awesome and how engaging that battle system is. You don't have to, I always think of Unlimited Saga when I talk about RPG battle system, because it's just like they threw the kitchen sink in there and made this really obtuse system. And you don't have to do that. You can do simple turn-based stuff and just pepper it with some good ideas, and it's amazing. And the peppering in this is the ring system. And it kind of makes the battles, you have to pay attention to the battles. It's not just mindless battling anymore, because it's all based on timed releases of one of the triggers. So you equip your characters with these different rings, and each ring has a different ability tied to it. As you create and craft better rings, they have multiple abilities hooked onto it. And when you start a battle, you select fight, and then all of a sudden your character starts running towards the enemy, and this ring starts to collapse down around the enemy. When it gets matched up with another ring that surrounds the enemy, you release it, and if you get a perfect, you can do some massive damage. And kind of the crafting of the rings and using the system really gets it really gets addictive, because using Kaim and Kaim and Seth exclusively as my frontline battlers, you really want them to dish out damage. So you want to have a bunch of rings that can just decimate everything. So you really get into kind of creating these rings and everything. Another cool thing is you can change equipment on the fly in battles. Before you select fight, you can press over on the control stick, go to a separate menu where you can basically swap out your equipment. So you can change your swords, you can change your rings, and you can change your accessories. There's no armor in this game, which I was fine with. Just changing out weapons and rings was enough. It was really surprising how adding all these armor selections in there just kind of bogs things down. But so you can swap rings out in the middle of battles, and sometimes you have to do that because enemies will change their weaknesses and things like that. It's kind of cool how they did the leveling in this game as well. You would think these immortals are all badass and able to just gain all these massive spells on their own and things. But you have to remember, these immortals are locked in time. So they don't progress normally like normal RPG characters would. They level up and they gain stats and all that kind of stuff. But in order to gain skills, you have to get them from either equipment or skill links with mortal characters. The mortal characters level up normally. You gain a level, a character might gain access to level 4 white magic, Then you have to go into the menu and select skill link, and then you can link to, let's say, cook. And you can teach Kaim level 4 white magic. And then you go into the skills and you can set a bunch of different abilities. So I think in the beginning of the game you get like 6 or 8 slots to assign skills to. And these can be passive skills or active skills, spells and things like that. And as you progress through the games, you find these things called slot seeds, which can increase your ability to increase your number of skills. And you can also learn abilities like slot plus 5, slot plus 10. And when you equip these, you get 5 extra slots or 10 extra slots. By the end of the game, I think Kaim had like 27 or 28 slots. So if you take the time in this game and really find all this equipment and all these spells, you are going to be rocking everything in this game. I beat the game at level 59 with Kaim. And the final boss was like not even touching me at all. I might have been way over leveled at level 59. But yeah, there's such a great feeling though, because in the beginning of the game, you do feel really kind of weak, and you feel like enemies are just beating the shit out of you. And then by the end of the game, you're just destroying everything. So there's a really nice feeling of progression and putting the time in with these skills. As far as the audio goes, it's kind of a mixed bag. There is a good voice cast here. I don't know, for some reason, like, the kid's always great on the nerves. Jensen can sometimes hit or miss, with the voice acting. The weird thing about it is, the music, which we'll talk about in a second, is in the mix. It's really loud. So sometimes you can't hear what the characters are saying because the music is so loud. I didn't go into the menu and mess with the audio settings to see if I could lower the music down. I'm sure you can. You can do it in games since the creation of time almost. Because I didn't really feel like I needed to because I had the subtitles below. So I just read, like an old school RPG on the Super Nintendo. I just read, what the characters were saying. If I heard it, I heard it. If I didn't, I didn't. That being said, the music, Uematsu, what can you say? you know you're going to like the music because it's Uematsu. However, this has some of his best tracks, and also some of his weirdest. And I don't know how much he had to do with the Sheena Easton song. Yes, Sheena Easton sings the end credits song of the game. But it's just kind of a weird song. And I don't know. Some RPGs do really good end credit songs. I keep thinking back to Final Fantasy VIII's Eyes on You. For some reason, that song, I always think, when I think end credits singing, I always think of Final Fantasy VIII, Eyes on You. But, yeah, this one's just kind of weird. You know, the phrasing is weird. I don't know if they did a straight translation of the Japanese song that I'm assuming accompanied the game. But yeah, I don't know, it just didn't work. I just kind of laughed, especially when it started playing over the love story in the game. It couldn't help but start to laugh. But, you know, some of the songs in here, like the main Lost Odyssey theme is just awesome. But there are some kind of weird Uematsu tracks that, you know, if you're a fan of his music throughout the games, throughout the years, you know what to kind of expect with that. So, for fans of Uematsu, definitely check out the Lost Odyssey soundtrack. And then finally, the graphics. The graphics are kind of a mixed bag. Sometimes they look really amazing, really awesome, but other times they just don't look good at all. I noticed some screen tearing, which doesn't bother me. It bothers some people. When a cutscene is going on, they use the in-game engine cutscenes. If there's a lot of characters on the screen, there's a lot of stuttering of the graphics. It just seems like everything's kind of really jerky, you know what I mean? And, but every now and then, like, especially with Jensen, sometimes their facial animations will just come through and you're like, holy shit, that is a great animation. Yeah, it's kind of hit or miss. Sometimes it looks kind of bad, and sometimes it looks flat out amazing. I don't know, you know, how difficult it was to program this game. I haven't read into anything like that, but graphically, it really is kind of a mixed bag. But when it looks really great, it looks really great. And what year was this? I want to say 2008, but yep, 2008. So, you know, what, about 3 years into the Xbox's life cycle, I need to slow down. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really, graphically a great game, except when it stutters and looks kind of weird. The one thing I want to say, and this is something that we're not going to see much of anymore, and it's kind of a shame because gamers are never going to get to really understand what this is, but it made me really nostalgic for like multi-disc PS1 RPGs. For some reason, it just feels like an RPG is that much bigger when you open it up and you see 4 discs, especially 4 DVDs, and you're like, holy crap, this is going to be a big game. I remember doing that in the PlayStation, like opening up Final Fantasy VIII and seeing 4 discs, and I'm like, no wonder Squaresoft went to the PS1 over the N64. But, yeah, I'm going to kind of miss multi-disc games, because I think now with Blu-rays, and especially with digital distribution, we're just not going to see that kind of stuff anymore. But I'm kind of a fan of multi-disc games. I don't know why. It's a weird thing to be a fan of, but it just makes the RPG feel grander for some reason. And that's kind of why I was hoping Trails in the Sky second chapter would get a physical release, because I wanted 2 UMDs. I don't know why I would want that, but that was pretty awesome that the game was released on 2 UMDs. But anyway, that is the game discussion for Lost Odyssey. If you haven't played this yet, definitely check it out. If you're a fan of old school Final Fantasies, PS1 Final Fantasies, or, you know, Super Nintendo ones, this is going to put a big smile on your face. And you know, I really wish I would have played this like right after I played Final Fantasy 13, because I think that would help. This would help heal the wound a little bit, because I just did not care for 13 when I threw it in, and this is more in lines with what I wanted. So, anyway, that is it for Lost Odyssey. I'm going to go out now and start up Child of Light on my Wii U. Yes, I downloaded it on my Wii U, so I'd have something to play on my Wii U. So, anyway, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Take care. I'll see you next time.